call the Saline City Council meeting to order. If you'd please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You have an amended agenda in front of you, and the clerk can correct me if I'm wrong. There was some minor change made to the motion to convene into closed session. Very good. There's some additional verbiage added to the motion. But let me start with attendance. Members present this evening are myself, Mayor Marl, Council members Gearboss, Seo, McClellan, Mitchell, Dillon, and Mayor Pro Tem Tahar. From city staff, we have City Manager Campbell, Clerk Royal. I don't see Mr. Rubel present this evening. Parks and Rec Director Scruggs. Our wastewater treatment superintendent also is not here yet. DPW Director Fordyce is here, and it is Attorney Sweats, not Curcio. The rest of you who are in the audience, we welcome you, and we encourage you to sign in the back to my left. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended unless there are additional amendments.
Move as amended.
Moved by Seo to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Dillon. All those in favor of approving the agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. There are no absences, so we'll proceed to citizen comments on agenda items. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments on agenda items? No, then we'll proceed to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for council discussion.
To approve.
Moved by Seo to approve as submitted, sir?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by McClellan. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business. Item 18-157, Merchant Park Work Group. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the August 16, 2018 letter from Mayor Marl and to approve or not to approve the creation of a Merchant Park Work Group as outlined.
Move to approve.
How about to acknowledge receipt first, Ms. McClellan?
Acknowledge receipt and approve, yes.
Very good. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Tahar. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have regarding my memo of August the 16th. However, just for the public's benefit, this is an issue that I touched upon in my July State of the City address. The state condition and look of Merchant Park is not up to my standards. It's been acknowledged as a deficiency by Saline Main Street and many concerned citizens. And so I thought it was prudent and appropriate to put together a work group to offer City Council design plans and also some cost estimates. And I couldn't be more pleased with the folks who volunteered. I think they'll work well together. I think there's a lot of expertise and passion, and I look forward to their recommendations and report later this year. I think in the memo, I don't have the memo in front of me, but I think I gave them until our last meeting in December to either finalize their report or provide us a update. Questions? Mr. Gearbaugh.
Can you just clarify on the process? Will there be some open meetings so that other individuals of the public can provide input? That was one of the concerns we had the last time this went through, so because it started growing bigger and bigger and bigger until it was almost out of control.
Absolutely. I think there is a clause in there that they are required to engage adjacent property owners and interested parties. But between Councilwoman Dillon, who is the liaison to this group, assuming it gets approved, and also the chairperson, Rebecca Schneider, we can certainly pass along the desire to hold some sort of public meeting,
Or at least
provide an opportunity to solicit feedback from our citizens.
Yeah, I think the last time would helpful. That will be much helpful this time. Thank
Very
you.
good. Noted. Ms. Mitchell.
Thank you, Your Honor. I had a question. I wasn't on council, but I remember reading the previous plan. Is that previous plan going to be considered, or is this starting from scratch? Or is that something the work group would determine?
That's something the work group would determine. All that paperwork has been provided to most of the folks who have volunteered to serve on this work group. I did provide all the materials and information I had on file to Rebecca Schneider. As I emphasized in my memo of August 16th, I'm looking for something that is modest, practical, and ideally comes at a nominal cost to taxpayers. And I wouldn't necessarily say that the first plan met that criteria.
I see. And then my other question is, I noticed that quite a number of Main Street people are on this committee, which I would expect some Main Street folks. I just wonder, if it isn't better to have a more diverse group. Have you considered the diversity of populations?
Well, I think there is diversity on the work group. I think there's diversity in terms of perspective, expertise, longevity in the community. While a number of
Okay.
people represent and/or serve in a capacity with Saline Main Street, I think that, I know rather, that there is diversity there that will render a good recommendation to City Council, that will help to render a good recommendation to City Council, excuse me.
I see. Thank you, Your Honor. And then my final comment is to second Mr. Gerbaugh's opinion that the public should be engaged. We just have too many projects that have gone without that. I think it's extraordinarily important to have one or two public meetings and engage, especially downtown neighborhoods, as much as possible.
Very good, thank you. Additional questions or comments? Any discussion on the motion? It's been properly moved by McClellan, seconded by Tahar to acknowledge receipt and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you. We move on to new business item 18-158. This is MML Annual Liability and Property Insurance Pool Renewal. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the August 10, 2018 memo from City Manager Campbell and to approve or not to approve the annual renewal premium with the pool for a time period, of September 1st, 2018 through August 31st, 2019 at a not to exceed amount of $143,037.
Move to acknowledge and approve.
Oh, boy, that was close. I'm going to let Gearbaugh be the mover and CO be the second to acknowledge receipt and to approve. Mr. Campbell, would you like to make a brief comment regarding your memo of August the 10th?
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as the memo states, this is for the annual renewal of the insurance for the city through the Michigan Municipal League Liability and Property Pool. We have on hand Judy Thompson-Trojan, a representative from the pool, if there's any questions that need to be answered. But this is the annual renewal. There is the initial proposal was for an increase to $142,811. However, there's a new benefit that they're offering that's just less than $300. It's so $143,037, and that would include to cover full replacement costs of a police cruiser. For instance, if you may recall, a number of years ago, we had a police cruiser that was totaled, and in the past, it was minimal coverage. Well, this would provide for a payment up to $41,000 for the purchase of a replacement cruiser, as well as the upfitting cost too. So we would propose the slight increase of the $143,037 renewal, and then also as a note, upon renewal, then the city would receive a dividend from the pool of an amount of $13,841.
Very good. We appreciate you being here. Would you care to make a comment? It's an annual thing of seeing you every August. Yeah.
I'm just here to answer questions. I don't want to take a lot of your time, but I'm happy to answer the questions that you may have. And we're also very happy to have the city of Saline as a member of the pool.
Very good. Well, you provide exceptional coverage and support, and we appreciate that. Appreciate your attendance this evening. Why don't you hang tight at the podium, and we'll see if there are any questions for either our guest or for the city manager. Let's start with Mayor Pro Tem Tahar.
Yes, I just wondered about the reason for the increase.
Most of it is because there are 60 vehicles. So I'd say at least 65 to 70% from the new vehicles.
So, okay, thank you.
You were talking, if I may, you're talking about the overall increase?
The overall increase of 4.2%. So most of that is because of covering the vehicles. Okay.
Well, so the 142, right? So from the 137, 242 is payroll. Our payroll went up. Where I thought we had it on there, but maybe not.
The payroll went up slightly. The property stayed the same number of law enforcement officers. There were 4 new vehicles.
Thank you. I wasn't challenging, just curious. Thank you.
Ms. Mitchell?
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Campbell, how many years have we contracted with MML?
15.
2003.
Okay. And I respect MML. I appreciate being part of the organization myself. And with respect, Mr. Campbell, have you done any bids for other companies in the community to compare?
We have not since 2003.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Additional questions? Ms. Dillon and Mr. Gearbaugh?
For Mr. Campbell, can you just clarify the police vehicles? Did we not have coverage for them previously?
We did, but, and I'll actually let Judy give you a better detail, but it wasn't as robust.
These vehicles always have physical, however, the way that insurance works for physical damage is on an actual cash value basis, which is an appreciated basis. So if you have an older vehicle that has quite a few miles, and they are giving us coverage on 5 years or older vehicles, you could have a $40,000 new vehicle that might only be worth $20,000 because it's got 50,000 miles on it, or it's not in good condition, as good a condition. But with this coverage, because these vehicles are ridden a lot and ridden hard, you may have a 5-year-old vehicle that has a lot of miles, but that doesn't mean that you don't still need to replace it if it's old. So this is allowing you more money to replace that vehicle in the event of a severe loss. It gives us more money to be able to get the car back.
And thank you very much for that explanation. Mr. Campbell, how short are we with the 41,000 to becoming whole, should a vehicle be totaled?
That should be right about on par. Trying to think, I was looking for the chief in the background, but we talked about this, and 41 is, so it's right about what we're paying for, not just the vehicle, but also to have it upfitted.
Okay. Okay. And then my last question will be, going forward, are we always going to stay in about the 6-vehicle range? Are we always going to be in that window as things going to age in, age out at the same frequency?
As of right now, I would say yes. I mean, I'm not aware that we're going to grow the police part of the fleet. So it's been that way for some time. So at this point, unless, again, we're using one of the retired cruisers, Tahoes, for the VIPS program, for instance. So, again, at this point, I would say no. But if we were, then certainly that would be a during budget discussion. But I'm not aware of any plans currently to do that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sorry to interrupt. Before get to Mr. Gearbaugh, we're getting a little bit of feedback on the microphone. If you make sure you don't have a cell phone anywhere near a mic. Thank you. Sorry about that. Mr. Gearbaugh?
Just kind of clarification. I know we do a lot of festivals and things like that, and just understanding, we had fireworks coverage this last year, and we may have it in the future. How is that handled? This may be a question for city manager.
Sure. So as long as they're a licensed technician that are providing, and Judy can provide further information, but they covered it. And I mean, we require the company that provide. Oh, sure.
Yeah, I wish, because I'm looking at here and it says special events excluding fireworks, liquor liability, and mechanical amusement rides, so.
For fireworks, if you have a licensed pyrotechnician, you are going to have coverage through that pyrotechnician as your primary line of defense. We can add $1 million to that coverage at no additional cost, as long as you have fireworks. So we can provide the coverage, we're not the first line of defense.
Right.
We want the pyrotechnician to be responsible for their coverage.
And for me, understanding a little bit, we have some society, like the Historical Society that runs our farm, and they put on events and so forth. They have their own policy, but the city also, so are they primary, and then MML is secondary, just like what you mentioned with the fireworks, or?
The city is always going to be primary for city events. If you have another entity that is holding an event, they should add the city as an additional insured. If you want to add, have them added as an additional insured on your policy, we can do that.
No, it's, I think the mics are too sensitive. Maybe Chris is trying to adjust it back there.
And so, no matter what the city does, with the exceptions in the policy, you have coverage.
Okay.
And so, if you have, like in the health, they have their own insurance, as an example, and they name the city as an additional insured program.
Got it, okay. No, we are looking at ways to kind of address the cost because it's getting more and more expensive to do some of that coverage, and I didn't know if there's potential to go through MML for a better approach.
If you do that, you're going to,
Up our
oh, I wasn't
liability.
on. Oh. If you do that, you'll pick up their liability, and so you have to decide if you want to do that or not. It's up to you.
No.
We can look at that, and our underwriter can look at it and review it and give you her best guidance on whether that's in the best interest of the city or not.
Got it. Nope, thank you.
Additional questions for either the city manager or our guest? Subsequent discussion on the motion. It's been properly moved. Thank you very much. Appreciate your
you.
time this evening.
Thank
It's been properly moved by Gearboss, seconded by CO to acknowledge receipt and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 18-159. This is new city assessor recommendation. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the August 16th, 2018 memo from City Manager Campbell to authorize or not authorize the city manager to make a conditional job offer to Mr. Robert Brazeau to serve as the new city assessor per the recommendation from the City Assessing Search Team.
Move to acknowledge and authorize.
Moved by CO to acknowledge and authorize. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman McClellan. I'm going to let Mr. Campbell discuss his memo of August 16th, and then I also spoke with Mr. Gearbaugh yesterday, since he was the council rep on the search team. I'd like him to comment a little bit about the process, and then Ms. Bennett, I think you were on that committee as well, so if you'd like to make additional comment, we would welcome that as well. So we'll begin with the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I got the proper pronunciation. I believe it's Brazeau. All right, so I would have, and so in the mayor's defense, I slaughtered it too, so.
Apologies.
So Mr. Brazeau, so Bob is here. So just a quick history, so you may recall, longtime city assessor Catherine Skull retired at the end of May. And throughout that process, we had a team, of a search team to go through applications and conduct interviews and such, and ultimately make a recommendation. What we didn't know going in, that there is a severe shortage of qualified assessors in the state of Michigan. The State Tax Commission has gone eight years without certifying a new assessor, which I'm not sure how they've done that, but they have. So it was not and of course it's similar, I guess, in a lot of aspects of the national job market, where a lot of folks are having a hard time filling positions at all levels of organizations. So that, unfortunately, is what we found here. However, we did, we renoticed and we did a few things, and so, but we were presented, Mr. Brazeau presented us with a proposal, and we brought him in for an interview, and it was going from, he was proposing 3 full days as a part-time employee at a cost of $65,000. Significant cost savings in that, but still the quality, and then I'll certainly, I believe you'll hear the similar comments from Mr. Gearbach, and if Mickey Joe chooses to comment as well, but very qualified individual. And certainly I know Bob is prepared to address council if you so desire. But we think pretty strongly that Bob would do a great job. And while it's a little bit different in for several years, for well, 22 and a half years with Ms. Skull, we enjoyed world-class service, and I don't expect that would drop, but instead of being here, 5 days a week, this would be a 3-day-a-week position. So, but all the other requirements would be completed with board's review and such as well. We would continue with the same model that with the assistant that currently is staffing the assessor's office, continuing the field work and such, and that assistant would be here, continue to be here 5 days a week as she is now. But I would be happy to do my best to respond to any questions, or if Mr. Gearbach would like to.
Let's hear from Mr. Gearbaugh as a member of the search committee. He can talk maybe a little bit about the process and the recommendation, and then if Ms. Bennett would like to add anything, I'll welcome that. Mr. Gearbaugh, the floor is yours.
Yeah, the process went pretty straightforward. We had our legal representation that actually deals with our tax tribunal, and he was part of it. Ryan, can't remember Ryan's last name.
Shannon.
And then Catherine Skull also participated, and Mickey Joe, and myself. And we were surprised at the number of candidates that just didn't apply. There was just no pool of candidates, and we reposted it 2 or 3 times. Then the individuals that did come in, a couple of them withdrew. Then we looked at Bob, and we looked at another individual and felt that his qualifications, at least for what he's done, 30 years, he's been with Wayne County, experienced all the different types of activities, because we are one of the more unique communities that has every type of property and type of tax abatement and other things that are on board, that we need someone that can basically just step in and do the job, and I feel he can do that. And as, again, there's potential things, as you mentioned, that the state's going across. There are some potential changes on how they're going to do assessing, but we're hoping, at least at this point, this will keep us moving forward. And I can't think of any other approach that at this point in time that we would do without, jeopardizing our abilities to make sure that our property is assessed right, that our tax tribunals are addressed, that the tax board of review is overseen by an individual that can actually answer the questions, be able to handle that. So at this point, I feel he's the best candidate.
Very good. Excellent synopsis, Mr. Gearbaugh. Treasurer Bennett, anything you'd like to add? Then actually we'll bring Bob forward, and he can introduce himself, and maybe for the public's benefit, talk a little bit about your background. Ms. Bennett.
Well, I was just going to offer that while we did have a limited pool, by no means was Bob anything less than qualified. He brings some great qualifications. He has a great understanding and history working with tribunals and different municipalities. I'm looking forward to working with him. Our only hesitation was that we wanted to have somebody full-time, but he has assured us that he can be available on call, and from what we found out, he's very responsive to every community's needs, and while he tells us it'll be 3 days a week, he also said more than likely he would be putting in a 40-hour, so I think we're going to get we have an excellent candidate, and we focus a lot on our limited pool, but I think we have a good choice, and I welcome him and you guys to support his appointment. Your turn, sir.
Oh, boy. You can throw me under the bus.
And pronounce that last name for us one more time.
Brazeau.
Brazeau. Okay, very French.
Yeah, we got kicked out a long time ago. A little bit of background about myself. I got out of the Army, didn't know what to do. Was hired by Branch County as a building inspector. I got traded 3 months into the job to the city of Coldwater, who said, well, we need somebody that can add and subtract and stuff, and we're getting 2 guys for you. And I went, what? And that's how I got started in assessing. I've worked in it pretty much regularly since then for just about 40 years. My last full-time job was with the city, or with Wayne County, and we did 24 units of assessing besides Wayne County equalization. I have done full tribunals from Visteon, Ford Motor Company, General Motors, L4154s, which are errors. I added $1 million to the Wayne County tax roll. Not assessments, but money on an annual basis while I did their auditing. I've done audits here. I worked for Washtenaw County for a while, and I worked with Catherine pretty extensively on some of your personal property issues. And I retired, and the only reason I can't do 5 days is because I promised that I would give Dundee 2.
Very good. Well, you have from the material that was provided to City Council, you have a very varied career and impressive credentials. So assuming that this motion passes, we welcome you here. I do want to reemphasize, because I'm sure this was articulated by the members of the search committee, but this community and our residents in particular, over the course of 20-plus years, got accustomed to a extremely high level of service with Assessor Skull and her subordinates. Very accessible, very engaged, eager to be helpful, and we expect and we hope that that will continue. And based on your credentials and your history, which speaks for itself, we have every reason to believe that that will continue. So thank you for your interest, and I'll open it up to questions for either the gentleman who we hope to become our next assessor, or to staff or a member of the search committee. Ms. Mitchell.
Oh, thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Brazeau, thank you for coming in tonight. Your CV is impressive, and your work experience is obvious. What is your educational background?
I have a degree from Columbia Pacific.
Okay. From Columbia.
Pacific. It's not there anymore. It's gone.
Oh, okay. We get that in today's changing marketplace.
Well, and it was one of the first, and I got most of my degree when I was in the Army. And it was one of the few places that would let you do it through there. And they had some financial irregularities, and then the state of California said, you don't exist anymore.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I do appreciate your service in working the armed forces. Mr. Campbell, I have a couple of questions. And this is not reflective of you personally as a candidate. It would be questions in any of this situation, Mr. Brazeau. Mr. Campbell, was our previous assessor full-time?
Yes.
And what was the salary for full-time?
I believe Ms. Skull was at the top at, I think it was 79.
Okay.
Plus benefits.
Plus
Yes,
benefits.
yes, plus full benefits, yes, thank you.
What did Ms. Skull do for commission work? What was she served on, what was it, planning?
Planning Commission,
She served on planning?
right, in my stead, yes.
And what would having 3 days a week, what would that do to this position's service to various commissions?
It wouldn't be impacted. There's actually, Chief Hart has been appointed to fill that spot on the Planning Commission.
I guess I think as I take a step back, I look at the value of an assessor serving on commissions. So are you saying at part-time, as the job description is right now, then whoever is filling the new assessor position would not work on any commissions?
Well, currently, again, I don't believe except for obviously the Board of Review, but I don't believe Ms. Skull served in any other board or commission except for when I had asked her to be appointed to the Planning Commission. So
That was probably the last 5 years of her tenure.
correct.
Okay.
Oh, the election. I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay. And did the full-time position, was it exclusively assessment work, or were there other office, like I know the office kind of helps fill into each other. Was the previous assessor doing other tasks, or was it assessment full-time?
Primarily, it was assessing. I mean, we have a teamwork methodology, if you will, up front here for answering phones and the like. But I mean, I would say 99% was, or 99.5% was assessing.
Okay. And so if I understand you correctly, your plan is to have the assistant continue 5 days, and then this part-time position, should it come into being, how does that affect the workflow? Do you have any concerns about workflow, I guess I would say, going to part-time?
Sure, I don't at this time, and maybe, I don't know if Bob could comment on his thoughts, but that was certainly a question from the committee to him, that, we've had a full-time, so how are you going to do it in 3 days? So I don't know if, Bob, if you have any comments?
I'm pretty familiar with Saline, having worked for Washtenaw County. And if Catherine wouldn't have been here, I certainly wouldn't have applied. I know her work. I've seen communities where I wouldn't even apply for the job. I've been called in a couple places, and I said, no, I don't think so. Wayne County taught me a lot. We did 24 units with 4.5 people. And did we get it done? Yes. Did we get it done as well as we had hoped we would? Probably not. But we handled between 800 and 1,000 tribunals a year. We did a huge amount of work, and we learned a lot of things that helped us essentially do shortcuts. And we worked really hard at it. And I'd still be at Wayne County if they actually had an equalization department anymore. But they don't. They've gone to an outside firm.
And Mr. Brazeau, when you said at Wayne you had 800 to 1,000 tribunals a year, what is the Saline load? Are you familiar?
I don't know that you guys have any pending, do you? I don't think you do.
I don't know that we have any pending. If we do, it might, we have been blessed with very few.
2 or 3 a year.
And that's certainly reflective of the quality of work that's been done.
Right.
And Mr. Campbell, I think my last question is, so I hear part-time, and then I believe it was Ms. Bennett who said, oh, but he might possibly get in 40 hours a week. So is the compensation a salaried position, or is there, and forgive me, I don't remember from the agreement, are hours discussed? How is the agreement written?
So the proposal is that it would be 3 days a week in the office. Now, if he chooses to do more than that, then that certainly is his choice. But it would be 3 full days as a part-time employee, and compensation would be $65,000 annually.
So I guess I just want to make sure that there's no ambiguity. So is 3 days a week, is that considered 24 hours? And I guess I'm confused about Ms. Bennett's comment about, he could work more hours. How is that being addressed in his contract?
Again, it would be, the minimum would be 8 hours a day for 3 days, so 24 hours. And anything above that would be on his time. And again, the compensation would be agreed to at $65,000.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor.
If I could add, for those of you who came in on Saturdays and saw Catherine here, assessors work office hours, and then they put in a lot of extra time as needed. And right now, there's a brand-new assessing program that everybody's trying to learn how to use. It looks like the old one, but it's not. And, I'm in meetings with the state because in Dundee particularly, the base value of cost of a home, C-class house, plain old average house, went up 197%. And the state is having trouble explaining how we're supposed to actually come back to a value. So we're working on that.
Very good. Thank you. Additional questions, Ms. Dillon, and then Ms. Mayor Pro Tem Tahar.
Thank you. I think my questions will be for Mr. Campbell. I think a lot of my questions are similar to Ms. Mitchell's in that we don't have an employment agreement in our materials. So I had a lot of similar questions regarding formatting of pay schedules and what constitutes part-time and schedules, as well as there was a notation on your memorandum that said that part-time employees qualify for holiday and sick leave. Are there other benefits that will be addressed?
Per the employee personnel manual, those are sick time and holidays are included in that. But there are no other benefits for a part-time employee.
Okay. I guess what I wanted to know also is, what is the cost for a contract employee versus a part-time city employee? I mean, what's the bridge between these two that the city is absorbing? And what is the cost benefit of doing that?
Well, again, a couple things. One, that's per Mr. Brizeau's proposal, that he wants to be a part-time employee rather than a contractual employee. With a contractual employee, we would simply pay him the gross amount without taking out any FICA and that type of thing. But with part-time, we would provide that as well. So there's a little bit of difference, but not a lot.
Okay. And have we explored the cost for contracting with the county? Because I thought at one point that was also an option.
Not an option. So we had, initially, we had talked to the county as we were running into difficulties, as I mentioned early on in the process. The county, Washington County, they do provide assessing services for some of the smaller units within the county, but they are not interested in adding any more. So we had some great conversations with the county equalization, and they were there, kind of, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, they said, "Hey, we have your back, but we're confident you're going to find somebody to be the new assessor in Saline." But as far as contracting out, that's currently not an option.
Okay. And then my last question goes to the annual cost salary. The figure seems excessive when you compare it with Ms. Skull's salary as being a long-term employee, as a full-time employee. And then now we're going to a new hire that's a part-time. And they just don't seem equal in that regard. And I just was looking to know, has there been a substantial increase that's warranting this cost?
It's called the market. As I mentioned, there are hardly any, I almost want to say no, but there's hardly any qualified assessors that are available willing to put in applications. As Bob mentioned, I mean, Saline is, I think, a pretty desirable place to be, especially for an assessor, but they are just not there. And so, the committee discussed that, but it's reasonable. It's not excessive, and I don't know that I don't believe we haven't had any success finding anybody different to this point.
Okay. I'm just concerned in that for 20-plus years, we had a full-time assessor who kept very busy. And now we're going to move into a part-time position. And I'm just afraid of that there's going to be a lag. We're going to not have the service that our residents are used to. And with the candidate having another job outside of the city of Saline that's going to be utilizing his time, realistically, the 40 hours that, theoretically could be there are really not there if his other days are being used by another municipality.
Certainly, I mean, again, as I mentioned earlier, and I don't know if Mr. Gearbach wants to add to this or not, but I mean, that certainly was discussed by the committee. We talked with Bob about it, because, yeah, I mean, those are some same concerns that we had, and I mean, I think certainly if the committee didn't believe strongly that Bob would be capable of delivering same level of quality service, we certainly wouldn't be recommending him to City Council going forward.
You want to add something, Mr. Gearbox?
Yeah, the only thing I'd like to add is that when we look at other communities, they're facing the same issue. A lot of communities have part-time. Did we have Catherine? Yes, and I think we probably benefited a lot from having that full-time position. But at this point in time, we don't have much of an option. We could go out and go to another company, but we're going to have that type of service from a contracted type of arrangement that, one, we wouldn't have somebody maybe assigned to us permanently. It'd be a different person each time. We've got to have an individual that has the personalities to interact with the public, and Bob has presented that type of activity, and he's done that regularly, so that's one of the things. When I look at his salary, compensation, and everything, comparing it against Catherine's, with his experience, they're equal, right on the dot. And in fact, we're getting a benefit from hiring him in terms of what we probably have been paying Catherine because of the fact, due to the benefits. Will we know that this is going to be the best way to go? We'll figure it out. We'll find out. It may be that we have to assess this differently going down a year from now. But there are some changes that potentially the state's going to put in place, and if those impact us, we're going to have to change the whole function. And again, we're also reviewing we're going to have our organizational review, thank you, Mr. Morrow, that'll help address this too. But we can't go much longer without having somebody in place to do this, to make sure that we achieve our goals that we have to have done. I don't know what our next deadlines are, but you would know them better than I do. But some of that review, and I don't want to postpone any, from my own perspective and from my own management approach, I would not want to postpone this any longer in an attempt to try and find another search at this point. I think this is a solution for now. We'll see how it works, but having a most experienced individual, you usually have a bit of a scale that he can ramp up faster than any other person that we would bring in here, especially if it's somebody that's a contracted type employee that's never experienced any of our activities here or at the type of a county level. And we had that issue with an individual that did interview with us, and that's kind of where she had been placed in, was that similar type of situation, working for that type of environment. And that's where a lot of the assessors have gone, is into that business in a contracted arrangement, but then they're assigned to multiple communities. They're not just to one community. So I think in this part, we're getting someone that's actually going to be dedicated to us, that has enough experience, and at least will be here 24 hours a day, or 24 hours a week, to which he'll be able to familiarize himself with our operations.
Thank you for that clarification. I have no more questions.
Mr. Hart, did you have a question, ma'am?
It's been answered, thank you.
Very good. Additional questions? Subsequent discussion on the motion? No, that's been properly moved by CO, seconded by McClellan, to acknowledge receipt and to authorize. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries. Congratulations, we look forward to
Thank you.
working with you. Thank you
Me
for your
too.
time this evening.
Take care.
Appreciate your comments. Moving on to new business item 18-160, Saline School Vending Service Agreement with the Rec Center. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the August 14, 2018 memo from Parks and Rec Director Scruggs, and to approve or not to approve the renewal of the vending service agreement with Saline area schools for an additional 3 years.
Move to acknowledge and approve.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Tahar. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Mitchell. Director Scruggs, the floor is yours.
This is, I call it the triple win. We've been working with the schools, the young adult program, for the past 8 years. They've been the vending business at the rec center. It's a job work experience for them. They get some revenue for their program. The schools are benefited, and our customers, and we're definitely benefited. They provide excellent service. It's great job training for the young adults, and our vending machine is always full. It's operating. If we have any problems, they respond within 24 hours or less, and it's just a great program. So I have nothing but good things to say. I would really encourage us to continue this program. It keeps our money in the community and within the schools in the city.
Very good. Thank you, Director Scruggs. Are there questions for our Parks and Rec Director? Ms. Dillon?
Just a quick question. Has it always been a 3-year contract?
I think when it first started, we did 1-year contracts. They were new
Okay, 'cause I
at
couldn't
it.
make the math work. I was trying to figure
Yeah,
out with the
and
years.
then it's just kind of, we decided to go with 3 years. It just gives a little bit more solidity to the program, and I mean, if we could make 5-year programs or 10-year contracts, that's fine by me. They do a great job.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Ms. Tahar?
Just a comment. I've been here long enough to remember when this idea was first presented, and it seemed like a really good idea at the time, and I'm so glad that it worked out as well as it had.
It really
It's
has.
great. It's always wonderful to hear you talk about it. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. No additional questions. Any additional comments? Then we'll proceed to vote. Thank you, Director Scruggs. Great initiative. It's been properly moved by Mayor Pro Tem Tahar, seconded by Councilwoman Mitchell to acknowledge receipt and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 18-161. This is final payment to Weiss Construction. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the August 15, 2018 memo from City Attorney Reisberg, the letter from Weiss Construction, and the letter from Nova Water Technologies, and to approve or not to approve the final payment to Weiss Construction in the amount of $26,790.
I'll move to acknowledge the receipt of the memo and the letter.
Okay, you comfortable seconding that, Mr. CO?
Yes.
Okay, it's been properly moved by Gearbaugh, seconded by CO to acknowledge receipt of the memo and letter from Weiss and Nova Technology. Mr. Campbell, would you like to begin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So you may recall, so Weiss Construction, they were the general contractor for Phase 2 of the improvements at the wastewater treatment plant. And the last item that's keeping from closing it completely out is the Nova filters and their performance. You may also recall Mr. Dan Loy of Nova, when he came and addressed the council back in July, he's mentioned before, but that this was the deficiency with the filters has no connection with Weiss Construction, and so that this is the Nova filters essentially between the city and Nova. He had suggested, and there's also a letter in your packet reflecting that he certainly recommended that Weiss be paid the $26,790 to close out that portion of the project. So, and as you can see from City Attorney's Office, from Emily Reisberg's letter, or memo, I should say, we don't have a reason to withhold that payment. So it's staff's recommendation that we would pay make this final payment to Weiss Construction to close them out. Mr. Brian Rubel is here from Tetra Tech for questions or comments, as well as our city attorney, Mr. Sweats.
Very good. Gentlemen, appreciate you both being here. We'll see if there's questions that pertain to you, but maybe, Brian, if you want to come to the podium, that'd be terrific. Questions for Mr. Campbell. Mr. Gearbaugh, did you want to begin, or did you have your questions answered?
Well, just one question I can start with. So we withheld this final payment, but Nova had been paid by construction company already paid Nova for the whole cost of the filters and everything?
I don't believe so. I believe much of this money was withheld from Nova.
Part of my thing is, I really don't want to pay Nova. And so, as far as I'm concerned, I think Nova should pay them, and if we need to end up paying Nova, we could go that route. But I just have this,
None of us like the situation.
and so I'm trying to figure out, from our own perspective, why we would want to pay for something that we know is not working. So, that's going to be my question.
Okay. Mr. Seal?
I've read Ms. Reisberg's memorandum, and I've considered what Mr. Loy said when he was here. I was impressed with Mr. Loy's sincerity and his willingness to see us through with the filters. until they're absolutely proven to be effective. So I guess I see Weiss's involvement in this thing. They went ahead and proceeded with the contract at our recommendation, or with our approval. And now they're left kind of in the middle, I think. So I see these as two separate things. The failure of the NOVA filters to satisfy us and Weiss's payment. So I think that we should go forward, as Ms. Reisberg suggests, pay Weiss, and then rely on Mr. Loy's good faith effort to stick with us in seeing the filters through till they ultimately are successful, and then begin the 2-year period for the guarantee.
Ms. Dillon, did you have a question?
I do. It is in the letter, the August 14th letter from NOVA, on the second page, where it talks about the warranty. And the first line says that the disc filter is warranted for 36 months from the date of October 1st. Have we started a clock running yet on that?
No, there's an email that accompanies that letter that says, I am dating it October 1st, but we will mutually agree on the date at which that starts. So there's an email that accompanies that in writing.
Okay.
That clarifies that.
Okay, and then the second paragraph talks about electrical control panels are excluded. And so aren't we actually having issues with panels right now?
There is an electrical issue on one of the filter components, and I haven't seen the final electrician's report. Maybe Steve has. NOVA provided a control panel and then the filters, and there's a wire that connects the two. The theory is that there is some sort of a defect in the wire between the two that NOVA checked, jumped across the wire and got flow of current. So the Weiss has sent electrician out to troubleshoot that. And I don't believe that's a big issue. I don't believe it's associated with the NOVA equipment in any way, but that is being worked on right now.
Okay. And then I just want to touch base on what Mr. Gearboss said, because that's the piece that I'm trying to figure out as to what this payment is actually for.
Well, yes, I can fill in the gaps. Our memories are probably a little foggy on that. The council actually did grant completion of the project to Weiss effective fall of 2016. And we paid them retainage, we paid them everything that they were due, except in the pay applications that the contractor makes to the city and Tetra Tech reviews. They had $26,790 the city still had not paid for the filters. So the city granted them full payment for everything, but because we didn't like the performance of the filters, and in many ways we still don't, the city withheld that $26,790. Outside, there really is no contractual mechanism to do that. We just did it because we weren't happy. So that's what that money is.
So then, just to clarify, was that, and this is what Mr. Gearby, I believe, was just asking, so is that money that's going to then be forwarded to NOVA? Have they already paid NOVA?
We don't really know. The records between the contractor and their subs are private. Those are not revealed to us. I understand through talking to Weiss that they are withholding money from NOVA. I can't tell you if it's $25,000 or $30,000, but there is some money being withheld from NOVA.
Okay. Because I still have extreme reservation about the NOVA filters and their reliability issues. So I am just, I'm torn because I'd like to see Weiss be made whole if it's not for the filter. I mean, like I said, I want to make sure it's not a pass-through. Have they already paid NOVA and they're looking for their reimbursement of it, or are they forwarding this payment? You know, where does it fall in the process? And I know you're saying you don't know,
That's a private transaction that
Right.
none of us have access to. That's,
Okay.
I think it's a separate issue, as Councilman Seal said. We can't control that.
No, but at the same time, I want to make sure that Nova's being held accountable. And at this point, I don't know that $26,000 actually makes a difference in the cost of those filters. So, thank you.
Additional questions, Ms. Mitchell? Then Mayor Pro Tem Tahar.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have to confess that I'm really confused about this, and the confusion has only grown as this discussion has gone forward. So let me first start with a procedural question. We have a letter from Weiss on what, page 45 of our packet, that's labeled item 18-161, correct? And then on page 47, no, I'm sorry, page 48, we have a revised mechanical warranty. So I am confused why those two things are put together. To me, the warranty is a separate consideration. Can you help me understand?
Sure. I'll do my best. So we wanted to, and I mean, staff has very similar concerns as council. So we wanted to be able to hopefully assure council that while the $26,790 would potentially be paid to Weiss, that Nova still is committed to this extended 3-year warranty that they've talked about and continue to talk about. And as Mr. Rubel mentioned, while they did put a date of October of 2018 to start as a start date, they acknowledged in writing in an email as well that if for some reason, unforeseen reason, because I believe this would be about, I think he said about 100 October, that by that date in October would be about 100 days maybe of successful operation of the filters. But if they're not, then we would we would have to move that start date back. But so the reason to provide that was just hopefully to assure and help council feel more comfortable that by paying Weiss's the final amount, that the city just wouldn't be left standing alone to deal with these filters.
So I understand the process that you're thinking of. I'm not sure why these are hooked together. So if we're making one decision or another about Weiss, why is a revised warranty for Nova is included in that package? Are we, by saying yes, we want to give a final payment to Weiss, are we also at the same time agreeing to change this warranty?
No, there's no change in the warranty. Again, this was simply to show that Nova is continuing to stand by the filters until they are at an acceptable operational level. So that's the reason we provided. Certainly, no intent to confuse the situation. We simply just thought the council would see this to help understand and maybe answer some questions that you all might have, to know that we still have a full 3-year warranty from Nova going forward.
So I guess my concern is that, I mean, there's no reference page, is there, in the packet? I have an electronic copy. Is there any reference page to item number 18-61 on this Nova warranty agreement?
I'm sorry, I'm not.
So I guess my concern is, I worry about city liability, that we have a date on here and there's a memo out there. That just doesn't seem like smart contracting to me. And I have a real concern about this city and contracting. And this is the kind of thing that gets us into trouble. It's not clear we're presented with a warranty, but the date may not be this or that. It's absolutely unacceptable to have this here. And it makes me terribly uneasy. I'd like our city attorney's opinion. I think by just having it show up in the packet, I think there's some question as whether we accept this legally, if it's part of the voting package to the final payment to Weiss. So that's one of my concerns.
Roger, do you want to try and address that?
Yeah, is your concern whether the memo should have been included in the package or not?
My concern is that, to me, the Nova warranty is a separate issue from payment to Weiss. Is that not true?
I think I would agree with that, yeah.
So why is it bundled together? And I don't want any type of challenge or legal issue to come up saying, you know, look, this was part of the packaging and it was part of their agreement and they paid for Weiss, and at the same time, this is in here.
Yeah, so first, I guess I would say, I don't think we were asked to review the warranty agreement for the purposes of tonight's meeting. And I do think you're right that they are separate in that this was a sole sourced item in Weiss's contract. And so the Weiss contract is one thing, the Nova responsibility under the warranty is a separate thing. And so I think you're absolutely right on that point. I assume that the warranty was put in here for your information, because obviously it is important for the city to know that if this payment is made, that you still are expecting the equipment to be put into serviceable condition.
Go ahead, Roger, I'm sorry.
But I think the key question with respect to Weiss is, did they do anything wrong? And from the information that I have, it doesn't appear that that has been demonstrated to us. Now, if there is concern that that's the case and there's some factual issue you'd like us to look at further, we'd be happy to do that. But if there isn't, I think it's really a question of who bears this responsibility, and that it's really more of a Nova responsibility than a Weiss responsibility.
Yeah, the documentation was provided to make sure that council was aware that if this motion were to pass, that Nova wasn't off the hook in terms of their responsibility to make sure those filters were working properly.
So I guess my concern is that we have no legal letter, and this is the first time we've seen this language, but it's now been revised. So I don't know what was in the language before. I don't have any standards. So I guess I'm saying I am displeased with how this is coming about, and I guess I will move on. What is the relationship then, Mr. Rubel? I'm just completely confused at this point. So we have a payment to Weiss. Were they hired by the city, or did Nova hire them?
The city holds a contract with Weiss. So your contract is between the city of Saline and Weiss Construction.
And so, Mr. Campbell, what was the point in withholding payment from Weiss if we contracted with them and they did the work?
Well, I think Mr. Rubel just addressed that a few minutes ago, and when council was, and again, I'm not speaking for council, but this is, my recollection and my understanding was council was dissatisfied with the operation of the filters, and so they wanted to hold back that portion from the pay request, which would have been the final pay request from Weiss, but that $26,790 that was attributable to the Nova filters. And so because the city council and staff, but city council's not happy with the operation, the performance of the Nova filters, wanted to hold back that amount.
That's my recollection.
Mr. Sweat, by signing off payment to the Weiss company, do we in any way weaken our position with Nova? Are they going to, is that something that they could say, well, it's not us, it's Weiss?
I think if there were any allegation that Weiss did anything wrong, that could be the case. But I believe, does Nova even
They wrote a letter saying that Weiss is not part of it, that
Right.
Nova is the issue.
Right. So, obviously, there are factual issues that we have to base this opinion on, but those factual issues would seem to indicate that this is a NOVA problem and not a Weiss problem. And, at some point, we are going to have to pay Weiss because they have done what they promised and the city contracted to pay them for. And if I understand correctly from the material, they did not pick this filter or this brand, and to hold them responsible for that, if it is truly a NOVA issue, at some point, is probably going to be challenged.
I see. Thank you, Mr. Sweat. So, Mr. Campbell, I guess my discomfort arises from this document. I understand it is just for reference, but I am concerned that there is a date that it's revised, and that implies an understanding with us or somehow an acceptance automatically. If there's language in the agenda saying this is provided for reference, or this is Exhibit B, but there's nothing, I guess I'm just concerned.
Understood.
Ms. McClellan, Mr. Gearbo, did you have your hands up? I'm sorry.
Yeah, the one thing I do want to clarify is that Weiss worked with NOVA to come up with this extended warranty. So I want to make sure whatever transfers adequately so there isn't a problem. But when I look at the NOVA extended warranty, and you look at the very last page of it, it says, under no circumstances, including any claim of negligence, strict liability, or otherwise, shall NOVA be liable for any incidental or consequential damages, costs of connecting, disconnecting, or any loss of damage resulting from a defect in the goods. We've almost twice already been in violation of the state's DNR issues, and if we get fined, they're paying, we're not paying as a result of this piece of equipment. So I don't want to have a warranty that foregoes their responsibility. So already this warranty's got some questions, at least for me, has some questions in it before. And if Weiss is out of it, that's fine. But this warranty was their negotiating tool, and we weren't involved in that. We just kind of said, yeah, we're going to get 3 more months after this thing finally starts to work properly, and we have yet to ever get to that point. And so that's where my legal clarification is, understanding that. The $26,000, Ms. Dillon's right, we're 2 years into it right now. The dollar amount isn't as much the problem of potentially of a multi-$100,000 replacement of this filter that we don't know how we're going to do that if this thing doesn't ever get to be working right.
Please, Mr. Sweats.
Like I said, I don't believe that we were asked to review the warranty for the purposes of this question. If you have questions or concerns on the warranty, I think it is certainly one possible outcome here for us to look at that between now and the next meeting, review what revisions have been made. And while understanding your concerns, Councilmember Gerbach, I think the question is, if there was a warranty that had that exclusion from the beginning, that was the deal that was made at the time, and I understand your concerns, but I don't know how much leverage there would be to remove that kind of a limitation on the warranty at this point. If, however, that was something slipped in at this point, we can review and give you our opinion whether or not that was done and if that's appropriate.
This warranty was in addition to the existing warranty that was there, so this seems like it's been written different than what I think maybe their actual warranty would be, because I'd be surprised go that length, but maybe I'm wrong.
We'd be happy to look at that.
Why don't we do this, because I've heard now from at least 3 council members who have some concern and hesitation, or at least that's what that's my prognostication anyways, that there's going to be a lack of support to move forward on a motion to approve, and I don't want people to vote on something they're not comfortable voting on. So in addition to taking some additional time to digest the information that was provided, perhaps Mr. Sweats, you or one of your colleagues at Dickinson Wright can do a thorough review of the warranty and provide some additional feedback and an opinion, a formal opinion, before our next meeting on September 10th. Does that seem reasonable?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Hart?
Yes, I'm not sure I agree, but about not moving forward with a vote on this. It's a question for Mr. Sweats. At the final sentence, which is what I was going to ask about earlier, the final sentence in Ms. Reisberg's memo says, payment of the remaining $26,790 will not constitute a waiver of the city's available remedies under the contract and product warranty. So review of the warranty and the contract, or review of of Nova's warranty really has no effect on what we do or do not do about Weiss. Is that correct?
I think it's correct in the sense that the payment of Weiss will not waive these warranty issues. If there's concern on the part of the city that something was changed in the warranty with this revision that was received dated August 14, that's the part that I don't know that I'm prepared to give you an opinion on tonight.
And paying Weiss does not change our relationship with Nova in any way, does it?
I can't really, for reasons Mr. Rubel stated, I can't really say that because I don't know if Weiss has paid them, if they're still withholding something. There may be a little bit, there may be a little bit of leverage that exists from that. I do think, though, we really need to focus our attention on whether Weiss did everything that they did that they were supposed to, and then whether we're getting adequate coverage from the warranty. And so I'm very happy to take a little bit closer look at the warranty, but I would say that, our recommendation, would be that we should seriously consider taking this action at the next meeting unless we find an issue with the warranty.
Okay,
And just to clarify, Mayor Pro Tem Tahar, I personally am comfortable moving forward with a subsequent motion to approve the payment. However, to an earlier point that I articulated, I'm beginning to hear from a number of colleagues, in fact, at least 3, possibly maybe 2, that there are some concerns. And so I'm uncomfortable as the chair, the moderator of the meeting, moving forward with a final vote when I have a sizable minority, possibly a majority, who are uncomfortable and unsure with all the information that's been provided.
Okay, thank you. I guess I would then, if we're having legal counsel review the warranty, I would also like a clear analysis of whether we have any reason to think that Weiss didn't do what they were supposed to do, which would give us a reason not to pay this final amount.
Okay.
If I could just respond to that.
Please.
We're very happy to give you a legal opinion. I can't give you a factual opinion as to whether or not Weiss is. So that's really totally dependent on the facts that we've received, so I just have not seen anything.
Do you want to comment on that at all, Brian?
Just that I think we've hoed that field before. The city did grant substantial and final completion to Weiss, so I don't think that action would have been taken if all of us had not already decided that question, so.
Okay. Mr. CEO, did you have a question, sir?
Not a question, a statement, if you will, Your Honor. I clearly feel some responsibility to proceed the way you want to, or have stated you want to, as the chair of the group. However, I think that they're 2 separate, completely separate issues, and I think that if we bring this back to the table again at the next council meeting, we ought to clearly bifurcate the 2 issues, the payment to Weiss, and at some future time, whatever we want to do with whatever the guarantee or warranty is from Nova Filters, without the 2 occluding each other.
Yep, fair enough. Ms. Dillon?
I would like to also kind of continue the discussion from Ms. Mitchell, which is that there are 2 key things that are missing from this. Mr. Rubel has stated that there is an email. I don't know why that wasn't included in this, that would clearly state that the October date is arbitrary.
Can you provide that, Mr. Rubel?
The other thing is the letter from
yes.
Weiss clearly shows an attachment from Nova dated February 22nd, which is not attached to this document.
That, I think, is a letter from Nova stating it's entirely their problem.
Okay. Well,
Okay, well, it'd be good to have that.
Yeah.
Okay, at the next one, when it comes back to us.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anything further? Okay. Motion on the floor to acknowledge receipts been moved by Gearboss, seconded by CO. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. How about a motion now to postpone action to our next meeting on September 10th, which means this would appear as an unfinished business item at the top of the agenda. Is that moved by Gearboss?
Second.
Seconded by McClellan. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor
I'm
signify
sorry,
by
Your
say
Honor.
quickly.
Discussion. I want to make it clear that I am interested in paying Weiss, that if the city has said they are done, ethically, they need to be paid. This is really just making sure that everything is clear, that our contracts are clear, and there's no bleed over between issues.
Duly noted. Additional discussion? Then we'll proceed to vote. It's been moved by Gearboss, seconded by McClellan. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Brian Rubel, thank you very much. Appreciate your time. We move on to the discussion portion of our agenda. First up is Commission, Committee, and Task Force reports from council members. Ms. Mitchell.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have a quick report from the Historic Commission. We continue to see an uptick in proposals for construction. We are still awaiting the results of the historic home repair tax credit. We're waiting for the state to finish and coming down one way or the other on that. The Expansion Committee is making progress on starting to look at expanding our current historic district. The committee is meeting regularly, and we're gathering materials for documentation, and we're recruiting members of the neighborhood to join as required by Saline's charter. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hart, did you have a commissioner committee report?
Yes, 2 items from the Environmental Commission. First of all, nominations for the Environmental Commission's Recognition Award are open now. Forms for this award are available at front desk at City Hall, also on the city website, on the Environmental Commission page. These are awards, you can nominate residents and businesses who demonstrate a concern for the environment by sustainable practices, and there are all kinds of possibilities. So nominate neighbors, nominate businesses in Saline. And then the other item is the Washtenaw County Cleanup Day, which is sponsored by the Environmental Commission. It's a county staffed operation, however, will be on Saturday, September 29th from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. And we have a new location. This, you may recall, is the one that caused traffic jams on Teft Court last year. This year, Thomson Reuters will be hosting. That's at the corner of State, or providing the location, at the corner of State and Textile. There will be soon, I believe, an article in the Saline Post that the Environmental Commission has provided. And there are also, I have flyers I'll give to the clerk for distribution, duplication and distribution at City Hall. Thanks.
Very good. Additional committee or commission or task force reports. Mr. Gearbaugh.
This is kind of related to Planning Commission, but overall, I would like to see council and the Planning Commission be given a summary report of the Pulte activity in terms of the problems that we've had arise in the last month or so. What I'm concerned before they go into their phase 3 and an additional development, that there definitely needs to be some formal communications to them, either from our legal standpoint or whatever. There's been some major concerns and issues that need to be clarified, and that not only does council have that information, but that Planning Commission gets it too, from the perspective of just all the problems that have been happening in that situation.
We could have Mr. Campbell report back, and then maybe have Mr. Rubel provide a summary or update at the next Planning Commission meeting, which I believe is scheduled. I don't think we have one anymore.
And it may involve our building inspector too.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think we have a Planning Commission meeting yet in August, but I know we do have one scheduled for that. Was it the second Wednesday of September? I believe so. Yeah. I know there's an agenda item, so we will have a meeting. Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Ms. Mitchell, committee or commission report?
Thank you, Your Honor. So piggybacking on Mr. Gearbaugh's discussion item, I have requested a meeting with the city manager to start discussing developer accountability in general and what our city policies are in order to have a better understanding, because it just seems like we're hearing about issues and residents are concerned. We have a lot of development that's coming up, and I wonder if we wouldn't serve our residents well by having that discussion. So I'm just announcing that, that discussion is upcoming, and I'm looking forward to sharing at the dais how we're coming along with that.
Reports or other announcements? Ms. Mitchell, then Mr. Seal.
Do you want to go first, Mr. Seo?
No, please.
Are you, okay, thank you. So one of the things I wrote council earlier today was a discussion of the process that we go through when we have issues that affect residents. And I'm using the Monroe Street parking changes as an example of that. It was pointed out to me, I was able to hear some constructive criticism that upon hearing that residents had not been talked to before these changes were suggested, and that council could have taken a moment and paused right there. And I expressed my disappointment with my vote in support of making those changes. And I think we all could have had a bit more leadership and asked for a pause until residents are duly noted and engaged. So I guess I would like to have a meeting at some point that discusses the process of how these decisions come about. I know Ms. Dillon was talking about a policy of always having residents notified and engaged whenever there's a decision like this that directly impacts them. Mr. Campbell, what is the timeline for that Monroe Street change with parking?
If I may. So, Mr. Fordyce, I'd ask Mr. Fordyce to give, since it falls under his department, he can give you a better timeline.
The timeline is as soon as the signs arrive. So the traffic control order was passed at the last meeting, so that is now the parking regulation on Monroe Street. So it's just simply the practical manner of getting the signs in stock, doing the misdig request, and getting them installed. So.
And when do you anticipate an extraordinarily rough estimate? I'm not holding you to any solid date, but...
It should be within the next 2 weeks.
So one of my concerns is that there is a neighbor that's impacted, and I'm talking about the 218 Monroe Street property. There is an agreement to install a driveway from, is it Curtis Lane? Pardon me. From Curtis Lane, the new street and the sightline issue. Is that correct? What's it called?
I don't know if it's Curtis Lane or Curtis
I can't
Park
remember.
Lane.
Curtis Park Lane.
Curtis Park Lane. Thank you, sir. So Curtis Park Lane, and I wonder about working with the developer and the resident, because right now there's no legal driveway to that property. And I understand that the parking along Monroe Street is public parking. But I guess I just have a concern in serving our neighbors well, that could we coordinate an effort so that the driveway is available? Has anyone reached out to the developer to ask what their timeline is?
I know that the property owner in question has reached out to the developer to resolve a number of matters. I'm not sure if the individual has received the kind of response and action that he would like. When I last communicated with the property owner, I said if he did not receive a sufficient response, I think by the end of this week or next, I would be happy to intervene and try to facilitate a face-to-face meeting or reach out to the developer on his behalf.
I appreciate that, Your Honor. I guess I just would appreciate some discussion from the dais and opinions from the dais. What is our obligation? In this situation, it seems like we rushed to a decision without understanding the full impact. I didn't have the knowledge that this property doesn't have any type of a driveway and that we are waiting on a developer. That information, I think, is pertinent, and I personally regret my vote to support that. And I would like some discussion amongst my peers of what the best thing is to do moving forward, and how we can, A, prevent this happening again, and is there anything that we could do in the meantime to make sure that there's safe access to this property before we change parking regulations?
I would say a few things to the broader question. One, council has the ability to reconsider the action it takes. That has been done in the past, and with the appropriate wording, the chair would be happy to work with any individuals to craft a motion to reconsider or to rescind previous action that has been taken by city council. I would also note, similar to what transpired with new business item 18-161, that at any time when any council member feels that there is an action item on the agenda and they do not have sufficient information or would like more time to discern the information that they've provided to articulate those concerns, an action can be postponed or tabled to a later date. The third thing that I would say is a best practice for all of us at this dais is as soon as we have a question or concern that relates to an item that will appear on an upcoming agenda, the best course of action is to immediately send an email, pick up the phone, and call the city manager to make sure that your questions and concerns are addressed before a council meeting, because 9 times out of 10 what should be happening at the dais is that we are prepared to vote and prepared to articulate to our colleagues and to our constituents why we feel the way we feel and why we are going to vote the way we're going to vote.
I greatly appreciate your words, Your Honor. And I would be interested in pursuing that action of looking at how to rescind the motion. And I guess moving forward, in that situation, I don't know what I don't know. I didn't know that there was no driveway access whatsoever for this resident, and that to me is just a safety issue. And I completely understand the sight line. I want to address that, but I also think there's a need to engage citizens fully, and I think if the council does not have a policy now, we should seriously consider that anytime residents are affected in this manner, that there is outreach, that there is a forum for them to address concerns. It just makes me uncomfortable to make decisions that I don't know are half-informed. And I want to grow trust in our community.
Well, and let me add to that, because I believe Councilwoman Dillon also sent an email to this effect. Not proactively communicating with the affected property owner was a mistake. There's no ambiguity about that. That should have been done. I've talked to the city manager. That will be corrected in the future, that anytime council is considering action that will have a direct and unambiguous impact on an individual or property owner, they should receive the courtesy of a letter. And a form letter can be easily developed where information is changed according to the issue. So that has been done, and that will be the standard moving forward.
I appreciate that.
As it relates to a motion to reconsider, I'm happy to meet with you, and we'll include the clerk too, and we can draft a motion for you to consider and offer at a future meeting if that's your wish.
Thank you so much, Your Honor. Thank you, everyone.
Mr. Seo.
Yes, sir. Another announcement. The Saline Brecon Friendship Guild, sister city committee with Brecon Wales, is putting together a trip to the British Isles. And this trip will take place, I believe, in the spring of next year, 2019. And they're in the process of taking deposits. And the reason I make the announcement tonight is because I believe there's a deadline of sometime around the 3rd week of September, by which, if they do not have sufficient people to sign up, the trip will be canceled. So I just wanted to make everybody aware of the fact that if you're interested in a trip to the British Isles that's being sponsored by the Saline Brecon Friendship Guild, please get a hold of Mr. James Roth. He's the one, I believe, who's taking the reservations for this trip.
I believe it's the 20th is the deadline, Mr. Seo, and I
Number
think
20th?
is the initial deposit $700?
I believe it is.
So we need to make note of that. Assuming that trip moves forward, we need to make note of the dates that the Saline delegation will be in the British Isles, because I have a suspicion that at least 3 of us on this dais will be attending that trip, so it might require a change in council meetings for May of 2019. We also need to make note of when our German guests are visiting, because I believe that's happening the following month.
They are coming here from June 3rd, I believe, through June it's either the 11th or the 14th.
Very good.
Mr. Mayor?
Please, Mayor Pro Tem.
Just a little postscript to the British Isles trip. One of the places to be visited is the not city, but village of Saline, Scotland. Although I believe they pronounce it differently.
Jeff, you want to, Mr. Fordyce, excuse me, you want to come back up for the waste management agreement amendment? So as you recall, we had a work meeting about a month back to hear a petition from the management of waste management regarding our contract. Mr. Fordyce, I don't know if you can provide any additional information. One thing that I requested and I have not yet received is I asked for some information regarding how other municipalities have responded to this request.
Right. So since that work meeting, we've had some correspondence with Waste Management and been working on actual contract amendment language in addition to those, getting some of the information that was requested at the work session. Mr. Brian Conaway is here from Waste Management tonight. Just today, he emailed me some of that information. I think he could present some of that so you have a concept. He did send today some contract amendment language. And in addition to that, we're working on an alternative way to address the recycling costs that I think might kind of cover both of us a little bit better. So that language isn't available yet, but Brian, you want to?
Brian, I'm sorry, would you like to make any comment this evening? We welcome you here and we appreciate your patience this evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor and Council. As Jeff mentioned, I did provide a couple of cities for him today. I can provide a couple more if I need to do that. What I'm working on that Jeff had sent me an email about was to try to put together a couple other scenarios, options of how it could work in terms of payment of the processing charges. And the two examples that I'm working on is the example that's used in this township of Ypsilanti right now, and also the village of, or the city of Milan. They're both a little bit different, but they probably are the only other two ways to look at it other than the direct residential per unit payment. My boss was on vacation. He just got back today, so I wasn't able to get approval on it, but I've put together a couple of scenarios, and I'll be getting that to Jeff as soon as possible.
And Mr. Fordyce, you'll be able to present and discuss intelligently those proposals, and maybe Brian, you'll also be able to attend our next council meeting on September 10th.
Yeah, I think that should be sufficient time to have detailed contract language and these options laid out for.
Because I would like, sooner as opposed to later, I would like to develop consensus to see if we're going to move forward and if we're going to make a change, what it's going to be.
Right.
Okay. There are questions for either Mr. Fordyce or our guest at this time? No, then we'll look forward to that additional information. The sooner you can send it out electronically, Jeff, that'd be terrific.
All right.
Brian, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
For the next meeting, yes. Wastewater treatment update. Steve, we also appreciate your attendance and your patience this evening.
You're welcome. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. Just a couple quick items. You had a pretty lengthy discussion on the Nova filters. We did have an electrician look at them, at the wiring problem on the one last week. He's sending someone out this week, hopefully to look further into the cause of the wiring problem. So hopefully at the next meeting, we'll have a better idea why that filter failed. As far as the odor control project goes, we did have two footings poured, one at the south side pump station for the odor control unit, and the other at the Sauk Trail pump station for the generator. That and some landscape fabric, that's all that's been done so far with the odor control project.
Good. Thank you. Questions? Ms. Dillon?
Are you on track with, is that where you're supposed to be right now with the project? Are you?
I believe so. They're getting permits from the city for some of the footings they're going to do, and there's going to be a lot of construction brought on site. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of equipment gathered, and then there'll be a flurry of activity.
Thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Mitchell, then Mr. Gearba.
Thank you. So one of the things I asked during the last meeting was about the Huron River watershed having their fishing alert put out that the fishing wasn't safe. And you and I had a discussion about the fact that we're in the River Raisin watershed. And my question is there any word from the state on the safety of the fishing sport in River Raisin? Have you found any more information about that?
You know, I don't know that, but we have not received the results back from our effluent testing, and that's really our responsibility. Is our effluent. I know the state's gathering information from all throughout the regions, and I'm sure they'll put out advisories and information to all the affected groups when they get a better database.
Do you know why the Huron River watershed had their alert put out so early?
I'm not sure. I believe one of the reasons is it's a drinking water source for a number of communities.
I see.
And the Huron River Watershed Council is a very active council.
I see. Okay, thank you.
That's possible.
Mr. Gearba.
Just one follow-up. As we're going through on this project for the waste treatment plant in terms of the odor abatement, can we have, like we had for the Michigan Avenue project, a weekly, just quick summary that can go on our Facebook page?
Right, absolutely. So we have, since we really, I mean, it's just literally trickling.
Yeah, I had a couple neighbors that asked me about it, and I said, well, we'll see if we can start doing just a brief, even if it's a sentence, what's going on for that week.
Well, so we have a pre-construction meeting. I'm sorry, not pre. We have a project meeting coming up on the 30th.
Correct.
Of this month, and so that was my hope, was that we would be able to get some list of tasks of the literally a handful of fairly minor tasks that have been completed to date, and then the next month or a couple months to put that out.
And there was one concern, I believe when the methane burns off, is there a cap that claps down on? Somebody indicated there was something that, I guess when the methane burns off, that makes a noise, or it's a cap that comes up and goes off when they...
I'll look into that. I don't
I'm
know
not
the
sure
answer.
exactly what it is, but...
Okay.
Yeah, if I may, we had, I don't know if it's the same or similar before, so not too long after it had been installed, and they had, my recollection is that we had to have some sort of adjustment, so it wasn't quite, because
They indicated that it had been pretty good until just the last week or so.
Yeah.
You know, that was just recently put back into service, so it hadn't been running for a while, so that's probably why they hadn't been.
But it had been adjusted, though, to do away from that.
And that is certainly a safety item that we don't want to adjust it by putting something in there that shouldn't be in there also.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Steve, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Fordyce, you're last. You want to give us an update on our comprehensive sidewalk repair program?
Thank you. As you recall, last fall, we kicked off what we called Phase 2 of the sidewalk repair program. Phase 1 being the cutting of trip hazards across the city. Phase 2 being repairs that require replacement of concrete panels, either ones that are too great of a disparity to use the cutting technique or involve cracking or deterioration of the concrete itself. So last fall, we brought on a consultant to help manage that program, hired a contractor, and went through a section of the city, sent out agreements to property owners who had responsibility for repairs to make things easier for them. Our contractor then repaired them. We sent out bills. We got payments. The city, as we went along, repaired sections that were city responsibility where there was either a utility issue or a tree had damaged the sidewalk or some past activity of the city's. That went fairly well. We learned some things about how to organize that. Basically, it's 100 different contracts, and keep all of that straight, and plan on rolling that forward for the next several construction seasons. The original plan was to, again, do it this fall, late summer, fall. However, my workload with multiple other projects hasn't let me get that contract in place. So what my plan is at this point is to get that consultant contract in place, plan the next 2 phases for spring of fiscal 19 and then summer of fiscal 20, get both of those planned with one consulting contract. And we won't let them, then there'll be 2 construction contracts after that. So,
So different fiscal years with same construction season.
yes. So we'd be right back on schedule.
Have you decided, so assuming we proceed with the plan you just presented,
Mhm.
have you determined which quadrant we'll be moving to first? So that would be construction activity in the spring of 2019?
Yeah. So the first time we utilized our sidewalk survey and tried to find the densest area of flaws, so to try to minimize our mobilization costs, basically. Looking at the rest of the data, I don't think there's any real concentrations left. So at this point, I'm thinking concentrate on the southwest quadrant. There's a few.
Southeast before.
Yeah, most of the work was in the southeast before. There were a few missed sections in the southeast, so I want to stay close to that as we move into the southwest. So that's what I'm looking at for spring. Where we go after that depends a little bit on how much we budget for fiscal 20.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Fordyce? Easy enough. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Who had a question, Ms. Dillon?
So have you had a positive response in the payments or for the projects that have been done? Or are we attaching this to tax bills?
I haven't heard anything contrary. So I know we got all the quantities finalized and all the invoices went out, and that was several months ago. I don't know if Mickey Jo's still here, but
I think she, if I may, Mr. Fordyce, she left the room, but those citizens or property owners that chose to participate, I had to sign the contracts that were in the clerk's office, and I remember referring to an Excel spreadsheet of all the individuals who had received letters, and I want to say the vast majority who were notified of a defect participated in the program.
yeah, the participation rate was very high. I don't know what the payment rate has been, but I'm assuming it's also very high because I haven't heard anything to the contrary.
And if a homeowner is having squares replaced, do they have the option at their own expense to have additional squares or the driveway apron done at the same time? Or is it limited to the defective squares?
So through us, it's limited to the affected squares. Now, but we're not, in that first round, we did not prohibit our contractor from entering into
He could
private
enter his own
contracts.
agreements,
Yeah,
okay.
and some people did that.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions? All right, Mr. Fordyce, well, then we'll plan to proceed with the next phase in the spring of 2019. Keep us posted.
Will do.
Thank you. Anything else to be brought up under discussion this evening? Then we move to the second public comment period. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Any citizen comments?
Good evening. My name is Darren McCleskey. I live at 218 Monroe. Thank you very much for the discussion on the parking issue on Monroe earlier. I have in front of me a petition that most of the residents on the street have signed, so I'm just going to read it. A petition against the no parking zone, traffic order 2389. City of Saline recently voted to make 325 feet of the west side of Monroe Street a no parking zone. It was based on a few complaints from the Curtis Park Bluffs. No notice was given to surrounding residents. Only one affected resident was in attendance of the meeting. As residents of Monroe Street directly affected by this action, we petition the change and request the following: the enforcement of this traffic order not occur. The city engage the affected residents to address both concerns surrounding sightlines and lack of parking. Parking alternatives be developed, as the subdivision creating the sightline issue does not have true guest parking outside of their own driveways. Acknowledgement that drivers often break the speed limit on this section of Monroe Street, and removing parking could contribute to more speeding. A citywide ordinance be adopted requiring notification via mail, posting, email, or phone call of residents affected by parking changes on city streets, and a general parking setback from residential intersections be established and not selectively enforced. So I'll just
Hand it
canvas.
to me, Darren, and we'll make copies. We'll put it in the official record and scan copies and send it to city council members.
Okay, thank you.
Additional citizen comments?
Mary Hess. The Monroe Street, I think one of the problems is private streets. And I would hope that council and planning would look at private streets. They're inexpensive to build because they're not public streets, and they don't allow parking on the streets. And that has been one of the problems that is presently working with the Salt Spring project. The other thing is, as far as Nova, I noticed at the bottom of one page, it says for services under warranty, Nova Water will be at its discretion to repair or replace damaged or faulty parts at the customer's presence. And I mean, at its discretion is questionable. The other thing is, as far as, I did go with a couple people to see Peter's project that they have across from the Salt Springs, the old Methodist church. And during the open house, there are a lot of people parking in the city's parking lot. And I'm wondering again, because it's private and private streets, if in fact our city parking lots will be providing for residents. The third thing is, as far as, that's it. Oh, I was wondering if at the work meeting you talked about a proposed shopping center. I would wonder if these, if this shopping center would be under the provision of possibly getting a tax abatement. I would hope not. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hess. Are there any additional citizen comments?
Good evening. My name is Kathy Radigan. I live at 221 Monroe Street. And I just wanted to, first of all, I want to thank you, Ms. Mitchell, for bringing up the things that you did about how that was carried out. I've been living in Saline for 25 years, and I've never experienced something happening in our community neighborhood without being informed about it until this particular incident or issue. I just wanted to bring to your attention that the east side of Monroe is where our mailboxes are. So we're creating a real problem because you have to leave room for the post delivery. And over the years that I've been there, it's really changed a lot as far as using the street for parking. The other day, I always watch as I get out of my car or into it because of the traffic. But I reached over to grab something after I had looked, and I was that close to having my door swiped. And I know that we have a problem there. I don't think this is going to alleviate it. I think this is going to make it worse. Also, it was mentioned that the couple complaints that were placed was because of the lack of having sight of oncoming traffic as you come out of that driveway of the new development. And, you know, everybody that has a driveway on the other side of the street is going to have a sight problem also. So that's all I wanted to point out. Thanks.
Thank you. Any additional citizen comments? Well, again, we apologize for not proactively communicating with the folks on, something just shake? Sound system. Apologies. We regret that we did not communicate proactively with you. That issue has been addressed and solved, and we will make sure that we provide letters or communications to residents when there's an issue on a council agenda that will have a direct impact on their quality of life or their property. I just want to respond very briefly, to Mrs. Hess's concerns about the sale of Lot 20A. We reviewed proposals from two separate entities who are interested in purchasing that lot. The second proposal, they are not asking for any incentives, including a tax abatement. The first is not asking for a tax abatement. Their proposal does include a contribution in lieu of taxes because it is a not-for-profit entity. We will, obviously, because it was a work meeting, we did not develop consensus or take action, but the issue will be revisited as a discussion item at our next meeting on September 10th. If there are no additional citizen comments, is there any other business to come before Saline City Council? Please note the upcoming meetings. And at this time, the chair would entertain a motion to convene into closed session under Section 8G of OMA to consider and discuss attorney-client privilege letter dated August the 4th, 2018 and August the 16th, 2018. The City Council will reconvene into regular session at the conclusion of closed session. Is there a motion? Moved by Gearboss, seconded by CO. The clerk will please call the roll.
Councilmember Seal?
Yes.
Councilmember Dillon?
Yes.
Councilmember Gearbox?
Yes.
Councilmember McClellan?
Yes.
Councilmember Mitchell?
Yes.
Councilmember Terhar?
Yes.
Mayor Morrow?
Yes, we are convened into closed session then at 9:23 p.m.